Paraguayan Electoral Court announced ruling party candidate Santiago Peña as the winner of the presidential elections. And the worldwide workers mark International Labour Day, largely marked by demonstrations that shows outrage from the working class against policies, the living costs, and working conditions. And China advocates for reforming the U.N. Security Council to give developing countries a greater say in decision-making in international relations and politics. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. Paraguay's electoral tribunal declared the ruling Colorado Party candidate, Santiago Peña, as the winner of the nation's presidential elections 2023. According to the electoral institution, after more than 99% of the votes counted, the Peña-Ayana ticket and the ballot received a 42.75% of the votes, while the runner-up formula, that of Alegre Núñez from the new Coalition for Paraguay, got only 27.48%. On the third place, with 22.93% of the votes, was the candidate for the far-right National Crusade Party, Paraguayo Cubas. The presidents of Argentina and Brazil, Alberto Fernandez and Lula da Silva, respectively, as well as Paraguay's sitting president Mario Abdo Benítez, were the first heads of state to congratulate Santi Peña and his running mate Pedro Ayana for their electoral victory. The president of the Superior Court of Electoral Justice, Jorge Bogarín, thanked the citizens for their participation in the elections.
Before 8 p.m., being 7:55, and having been scrutinized more than 90% of polling stations, we are able to say that our TREP system gives us as a result what you are seeing on the screen. Simply thank you. Thank you very much to all. Have a good night.
The presidential candidate for the Colorado Party, Santiago Peña, addressed the nation after winning the presidential elections and ratified that he will not let the people down.
Let us forget about the fatalism that we are doomed. We are the owners of our own destiny, of our future, of our future. We are not going to let you down.
We move on to other topics. The disapproval rating of Peru's President Dina Boluarte rose to 79% in April, while 9 people out of 10 rejects the Congress management, according to a new survey conducted by the Institute of Peruvian Studies. According to the opinion poll, only 15% of the citizens interviewed approved the Boluarte's administration, while 6% chose the no option. Likewise, the survey showed the rejection rate of the Peruvian head of state was the highest in the southern region, with 86% of the population agreeing that she should resign. Similarly, the rejection rate of the Congress was also the highest in the region, with 95% of the citizenship disapproving the performance of the current parliamentarians and clear demands for its closure. The president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, denounced the existence of plots against her government by some sectors of the opposition in a message to Hondurans on International Workers' Day. Castro also pointed out to the existence of a smear campaign against her on social media that has been running since she took office on January 27, 2022.
When we assumed the direction of the country, we had 2 choices: to accommodate and admit the crisis and be indifferent to the suffering of our people in front of those who for generations have delivered our common heritage to particular interests, or to fight and march towards the refunding of Honduras. Today, they are conspiring to destabilize my government. Their goal is to separate the government from the people, to create confusion, discontent, and despair.
On Monday, the United States Bank First Republic's assets will be taken over by J.P. Morgan after it became the third North American lender to fail in 2 months. The collapse followed the failures of the U.S. lenders Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank after investors withdrew the funds. In a statement, J.P. Morgan agreed a deal with regulators to acquire the majority of the First Republic's assets, including over $100 billion of loans. In this sense, California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation announced early it had taken possession of the First Republic, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation would act as its receiver. Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve was forced to step in with emergency measures to stabilize the markets to prevent more funds being withdrawn amid growing fears of a new wider banking crisis. In Haiti, Le Nouveliste celebrates on Monday 125 years as the dean of the Haitian press, witness and watchman of the national history and the oldest French-language newspaper in America. It was born as Le Matin on May 1, 1898, under the direction of Guillaume Cherokee, and 15 months later, given the difficulties of a morning newspaper, it became its current name, or took its current name, with the same team and design line. Since then, it has become a multimedia with print, digital format, and sports, cultural, and youth columns. Its chief editor, Franz Duval, pointed out Le Nouveliste has lived in 125 years all the turbulences of Haitian thought without ever deviating from its foundation principles. The editor also said that despite of the difficult times for the newspaper and for all Haitians with an economy in decline for the last 5 years, Le Nouveliste does not give up. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, trade union movements around the world began commemorations for International Workers' Day. In the Philippines, thousands of workers held a peaceful mobilization through the streets of Manila and other cities in the country. Likewise, a massive protest took place alongside Spain Boulevard with thousands of workers from trade groups under the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines calling for an increase of the minimum wage and the government to put an end to contractualization. They also highlighted the importance of the date honoring unionists and workers from the McCormick Reaper plant in the United States city of Chicago, who on May 1, 1886, combined to make the city the center of the national movement for an 8-hour day. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva confirmed on Sunday the increase in the minimum wage on the occasion of the commemoration of International Workers' Day. Lula da Silva indicated that as of May 1st, a 2.8% increase will go into effect, bringing the minimum wage of the country from $242 to $260, which is a discrete rise, but as Lula said, is real and substantial. In a message to the Brazilian people, Lula stated that in the next few days he will send to Congress a bill that will allow the minimum wage to be adjusted above the inflation rate of the previous year. The founder of the Workers' Party assured that during his third term in office, the minimum wage will again be the instrument of social transformation that it was in the past, when it grew 74% above inflation and allowed millions of Brazilians to escape from poverty. Thousands of people demonstrated all across Spain in the framework of International Workers' Days. Demonstrators in central Madrid saw the country's two most prominent trade unions, the Workers' Commissions and the General Union of Workers, led several marches for labor rights and justice, from the historic Plaza de Cibeles to the Puerta del Sol Square. Protesters also demanded the government to provide protection wages and better pensions for workers, as well as to provide the struggling businesses and daily wage earners with European standards of work protection. In France, workers gathered to participate in Labor Day's mobilizations, with unions expecting more than 1 million people will march through towns and cities on Monday. Hundreds of thousands of people on Labor Day to vent their anger against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform, with unions vowing not to stop fighting even after the changes were signed into law. The main march in Paris kicked off at noon along the traditional protest route at Place de la République to Place de la Nation. Police had been given a last-minute go-ahead to use drones as a security measure and used tear gas in Toulouse in southern France as tensions erupted during the demonstrations, while a car was set on fire in the southeastern city of Lyon. France has been rocked by a dozen days of nationwide strikes and protests against Macron and his pension changes since mid-January, some of which have turned violent. In Greece, the commemoration of International Workers' Day will not only be focused on the rights of the working class, but a public transport strike, possibly carried out by the trade unions, will take place in the capital, Athens. These activities are part of the struggle of the social sectors and workers. The demonstrations will echo early March protests after a train collision back in February 28th killed 58 people, with thousands protesting for justice in the case. And thousands of workers from the country's two main general unions are mobilizing in central Seoul, South Korea, to commemorate Labor Day. The Korean Confederation of Trade Unions called for a World Day of Labor and Convention in the central district of Jogno on Monday, where they are expected to announce a general strike for July. Meanwhile, some 50,000 members of the Korean Federation of Trade Unions are set to hold a National Labor Congress. Members of the Russian Communist Party joined the commemorations of this May the 1st, with mobilizations in different cities in the country, such as Novgorod and Volgograd, to commemorate the Workers' Day. And in Russia, a freight train carrying fuel derailed on Monday after an explosive device detonated on the railroad tracks in Bryansk region bordering Ukraine. The territory's governor, Alexander Bogumaz, reported from his Telegram channel that the incident occurred at kilometer 136 of the railway line and no one was injured. In a statement, the Russian State Railroad Company specified that the train's locomotive caught fire after derailing. In addition to the locomotive, 7 cars were overturned, with the railway management body saying the incident was caused by the intervention of outsiders. This is the first time a derailment has been reported on Russian territory since the start of the special military operation in Ukraine. However, this nation has suffered several acts of sabotage in military bases, army recruiting centers, and railways. The new constitution of Uzbekistan was endorsed by more than 90% of the people who took part in the corresponding referendum. This was announced by the Central Election Commission. According to the report, 15 million people voted in favor of the constitutional reform, which means a support of 90.21%. Meanwhile, the Electoral Authority reported a turnout of 84.54% of the electorate. From now on, the new constitution will come into force once the Electoral Commission publishes the results of the referendum, which should happen within 10 days after the vote. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Monday, the head of Chinese diplomacy, Wang Yi, called for reforming the UN Security Council to give developing countries a greater say in decision-making. During a meeting with the ambassadors of Kuwait and Austria to the UN, Wang Yi considered that the Security Council reform should uphold equity and fairness, increase the representation and voice of developing countries, allowing more small and medium-sized states to have more opportunities to participate in the Council's decision-making. The head of the Chinese diplomacy stressed that the UN should redress historical injustices against Africa. The Security Council is made up of 15 members, 10 of whom are elected on a rotating basis. The permanent ones are 5: China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, who have the power to veto the institution's resolutions. Tens of thousands of Sudanese and foreigners crowd Sudan's port, trying to escape the fighting. As different countries continue evacuations of their fellow nationals in the country, they are also coordinating actions to help those fleeing in search of safety to get out. Last Saturday, the United States successfully evacuated hundreds of its citizens from Khartoum, who are now safe in Port Sudan on the Red Sea and are waiting to be transferred to Saudi Arabia in the first operation of its kind since the war began. So far, at least 528 people have been killed and more than 4,500 injured in the fighting, according to the United Nations. A Palestinian teenager was killed in the early hours of Monday after clashes broke out during an Israeli raid on a Palestinian camp in the occupied West Bank. Jibril Muhammad Kamal al-Lara, 17 years old, was announced dead by the Palestinian Health Ministry after being shot directly in the head by the Israeli troops and was laid to rest hours later. The ministry said another 6 civilians were wounded, including 3 in critical conditions. Israeli special forces stormed the Akubat Jabr camp in Jericho at dawn in manhunt, resulting in a clash with residents and resistance fighters in the camp. Akubat Jabr camp has been raided repeatedly by Israeli forces in recent months, like other towns across the West Bank. Injuries and arrests were reported elsewhere on Monday, as Israeli forces also stormed the Nur Shams camp in Tulkaram in the West Bank's north. The foreign ministers of Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Egypt met in Amman to discuss the situation in Damascus. The meeting will assess the relations between these countries and the Syrian government, their proposals, and the Jordanian initiative to reach a political solution to the crisis in that country, as said the official spokesperson of the Jordanian Foreign Ministry, Zinan Majali. His government, he explained, proposed to form an Arab group to discuss live with Bashar al-Assad a detailed plan of steps to resume full diplomatic ties with the Arab League nations. As part of these approaches, senior representatives of al-Assad's government traveled to neighboring nations to discuss ways to reach a political solution to the crisis in that country. And now we move on to other topics. 4 people were killed in Yemen after the collapse of a water dam in the Al-Mawid governorate, about 100 kilometers west of the capital Zana. Local authorities confirmed the collapse of the Al-Aqwabi Dam, which caused a flood that swept away a mosque with 4 people inside, killing all of them. The governorate attributed the dam's collapse to heavy rains and torrential flows that also damaged nearby houses. In this sense, Yemen's National Center of Meteorology issued a warning to citizens in several governorates, including Al-Mawid, about heavy rains and advised them to avoid traveling through torrential passages, valleys, and reefs during and after the rainfall. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.